Okay, perfect. We're unfrozen. All right, so today I have a little bit of a heavier kind of yap sesh at the beginning because there's a lot of steps to configure your flex boxes as well as a shift in the way that we do styling. The good part is that you can see fifth period's example yesterday if you go to the Tuesday part on Canvas, and you'll also have the recording of today's from what I show you here coming up shortly. The second-ish half of class I kind of have blocked off as a study hall because I know a lot of students have mentioned that you need a little bit more time to work on these kind of things or to just work on what you need to work on. That is fine, but keep in mind that I need to talk for a minute first before we get to that study hall portion. So I'm going to check your screens real quick, make sure you're locked in. All right, so for example, if you're battle catting or watching videos on battle cats or sim clicking, wait just a sec. We did the entry task of how do you recharge after a long day. It's an important thing to kind of keep reminded of. We are always, sometimes the web design entry tasks are going to be related to the actual coursework, and sometimes they're just going to be related to remembering that you should have a life outside of school. And it's important to remember what to do and use that life outside of school. So what are we doing today? This looks like a lot of things, but it's a lot of things that are connected together. The main thing is Flexbox configuration. That's what config is short for. Okay? We'll have a study hall with remaining time, as well as some more detail and some more customization tomorrow. And then I have something in mind, fun on Friday again. But because, real quick, I am going to FCCLA next week. And if you weren't aware, we have Friday the 13th off. So next week is only a 4-day week. And then, but I will be gone the 10th, the 11th, and the 12th. So you'll have a sub and you'll have a project to work on that's related to these flex boxes. You'll have the videos to access, you'll have all the Canvas materials you need, but I will not be here from Tuesday through the rest of the week. So I'm only going to be here on Monday. That being said, this is kind of the main thing we're going to focus on for these next 2 weeks is this Flexbox idea because it's really important to the idea of web design. What do you get out of this today? You get increased organization on your pages. They're going to start looking more like the semantic tags example that you see from last week, if you're still using that W3 Schools as a resource. You can better customize your pages after the style container that I'm going to show you a little bit later. And this is practice to getting you ready for more advanced functions on your page and making it look and behave in a specific way. Two main methods I'm going to demonstrate to you, and then I want you to experiment. Let me show you. I want you to experiment around. Remember, you have some study hall time built in today, so start with my stuff and then go into the other stuff you need to go into, and then we'll get to the tracking progress a little bit later. Okay, so with a Flexbox, it is a way to specifically distinguish your div containers. Remember, we've been building a lot of these div containers so far. Everything in web design is going to be contained in some type of box, whether that is just your basic divider, your div, or something specific like you're making a section of your web page, you use the section container. You're putting an aside on your page, you use the aside container. You're making a navigation bar across the top or the bottom. You make a nav bar, right? All your different types of containers that contain all your different types of pieces are generally going to need some type of organization or flow to them. And I'm going to show you how to do that first with Flexbox because it's a really easy way to start making your pages more responsive and behave like a little bit more professionally. Okay? I mean intentionally when I say professionally. So you're going to see there are two links right here in the resources. There is a Flexbox on W3 Schools, and then a more customizable example of different Flexboxes. I'm going to start here with the W3 Schools and show you what a Flexbox does in general. Okay, so this is something that's using CSS, which is a language called cascading style sheets. Cascading like a waterfall cascades. It waterfalls down across all of your different code. Style is just like that style attribute you've been using thus far, and then a sheet is just because it usually is like a separate file, but we'll get to that a little bit later. With CSS, you can create something called a Flexbox that shows you with these 5 items right here. Now, these 5 items are specifically this way because they're designed for flexible layouts and responsive layouts. All of us have a wide variety of screens that we use every day, different tablets, phones, computers, laptops, projectors, TVs, sometimes even like car displays have this type of attribute applied to them. And it's important for you as a developer to not have to write a different website for every single screen size. Flexbox is going to make that easier for your computer to guess on how to make it flex and how to make it respond. So if you click on the try it yourself, and we look at our flex container right here with our 5 items, those are all dividers. And if you remember back to last week, where we talked about block level elements versus inline level elements, and I apologize for how kind of yellow tinted my projector is. I think it needs a new bulb. Block level elements create a new line every single time you call them, every single time you put them into your page. So these divs, in theory, should be on their own line. Everything should have its own line next to one another. However, because our divs are in a class called container, as you can see right here, they're behaving differently. Because up here, in the style part, we've created some specific rules that change the way they look. And the way that that changes is as you change the size of your viewport, if I make this bar smaller and smaller, you're going to see that these items are going to try and maintain as much of their order as possible. You're going to see we're going to start to lose item 5 a little bit. We're going to start to lose item 4 a little bit, right? They're starting to disappear off the page, even though our paragraphs down here are moving like normal, okay? The first and most important step about using CSS and about creating flexboxes is to understand this idea of assigning things classes. And how I want you to remember that is that all classes have periods, right? Just like at Skyline. So when you create, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start that over. If I set a rule for a specific class, for example, if I set a rule for just 4th period, it's going to affect all of y'all because you're all in the same class, right? That makes sense. Each one of you, while being an individual type of element, an individual type of student. What? Okay. Being an individual student, even though you're in a class container, you're in 2207, you're all affected by the same rule. That's how I want you to remember CSS class rules, is they affect an entire container and everything in them. Okay? And so ID rules are more specific because we all have student IDs, right? We all have a specific student ID number that relates just to us. If I set a rule based on your student ID, or if I set a CSS rule with an ID, it's only going to affect things with that ID. Does that make sense? Classes affect everything. They're more general. IDs affect specific individual students. So let me show you how you can start building this inside of your VS Code. If we go into VS Code, I'm going to open up your, I've just been using the A4 practice folder because you haven't had a chance to create a new one yet. Hold on, I broke that. Let me unbreak that. Let's get rid of this real quick. And then get rid of this. That was me experimenting a little bit later. I'm going to open up your P4 folder by going to File, Open Folder. And then I'm going to find, based on the naming scheme, because remember this was back from last week, 224, we're going to see that P4's A4 is right here. Click on that one time, then click Select Folder right down here. And that's going to open up our work that we've created thus far. This is the first time we're going to put something inside of the head container of our document. So if you do not have a head container, I would make sure that you have one included inside of your HTML like you see right here. As a reminder from last week too, the head container contains stuff that other people cannot see, just like they cannot see inside of your head. But everything that you put on the body, like your specific clothes, your specific accessories, whatever, that's going to be what's visible to the outside world, okay? So instead of writing our style in this way called inline, where it's attached to each specific element, we're going to create a style container up here in the head. We're going to give some brain rules for our web page, okay? And you do that really simply by writing the word style as a tag. And you go shift comma, style, shift period, and then hit enter, okay? Because head is the parent of style, it's going to be a little bit closer to the numbered line in the thing called the stack order. That's something I think I talked about last week, where when you load up an HTML page, when you visit a site on the internet, it's going to start at line number 1 and work its all the way down to line whatever it ends on, okay? Now, inside of our style container, we need to write a class rule. And this is where I want you to remember that all classes have periods, okay? When you write a rule for a class using regular CSS syntax, you always start with a period, okay? Because that's going to tell our computer, look for something with this specific class name assigned to it. And we're going to call that class with a period up in the style container, just the word container, okay? And you can see as I type out period container right here on line number 3, everything underneath it turns this funky shade of yellow, and while our HTML isn't exactly mad, it's not exactly happy either. Okay? It doesn't look like the way that it used to. The next thing you need when you're writing a CSS rule are these curly brackets. Okay? CSS rules come in 3 parts. This is the first part called the selector. The selector selects the thing that you're trying to change. Okay? So after the selector, you add a curly bracket, and that's going to make our HTML look back to normal. But it's going to make our tab turn kind of yellow because it's a little bit confused, like a yellow light. You could either go forward, you could stop. It's not quite 100% sure. You can hit enter again to give yourself another container inside of a container, kind of like when you stack different Tupperwares. Or you know those dolls, I think they're called Matryoshka dolls, where they stack within each other and they get smaller and smaller. You can think of web design like that a little bit too. Now we have a selector right here, and there are 2 more pieces that we need for our CSS to become functional. We need a property and a value. And properties and values are something you've already experimented with. You just maybe don't know their exact name. A property is a thing that you're trying to change, like color, and a value is the thing you're trying to change the property to, like red or blue or green. Okay? So all CSS rules that live inside of a style container like this or on a separate style sheet are going to have selectors and then properties and values. And the property and the value that I want you to use today is the property of display, because we're changing the display of something specific. And just like when you write inline style, you need to use a colon after your property, just like you can see right here on the border. And I want you to set the value of display to be the word flex, followed by a semicolon. That's the one with the comma. All right? I'm going to go over that one more time because this is a lot of new knowledge. This is a lot of new ways to create something specific on your HTML. We started with a style container that lives inside of the head container. Because we're writing CSS rules, CSS isn't technically a coding language. It's more like a helper language. It doesn't really run by itself, and it has to have HTML to attach to, okay? CSS has properties, the thing that you are, or sorry, selectors, the thing that you're changing. For in this case, it's going to be our container. It has properties, the thing that you're changing about the selector. And then it has values, the thing that you are setting the property to. Think most frequently about color being a property, and then the name of the color being a value. General to specific, okay? Once I run this code, nothing's going to happen because we haven't given anything the class of container yet. All right, so if I go under here, for me it's line number 16, but I go after my P4 paragraphs right here, and I create a div, shift comma, div, shift period, enter, and then I add some block level elements like paragraphs. So we're going to call this block paragraph 1, all right. Control C, and then because that's already coded, I can just Control V. Oops, I forgot to get the whole thing, so it didn't quite work. Highlight, Control C, enter, Control V, Control V, Control V, Control V, and then I'm going to just change these to be 1, 2, using my arrow keys to get around quickly, 4, 5. So because I had something that works, I want to just reuse it as much as possible. Okay? If I go to run and debug this code that I've done right here, creating my block level div container, you're going to see that there is a block paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 right here. Okay? We're going to use this div container to become something called a flexbox. And we do that very simply by giving it a class name that matches our style class. So we're just going to call this container. And you do that by adding an attribute to the start tag, always at the beginning, right? Just like when we used to do style, just like when you do href, or like when you do src, an attribute. Go space, write the word class, hit enter, so that you get the equals quotes, and then we're going to give it the exact same name without the period that we put up in the style container. Okay? We're going to call it container. All right? Now, once I Control S to save, and I click my refresh, because this div has a class rule of container, all of the block paragraphs in the classroom will be affected by the class rule above. Okay? That's why I want you to remember when you're writing this that all classes have periods. They're always going to start with a class container right up at the top here. So I want to make sure I copy and paste this little bit of content, a little bit of sandwich ingredients. Oops. Bring my thing back up here. Oop, that's wrong again. There we go. And V. Okay, Control S. And when I click refresh, my green refresh arrow right here, you're going to see that my block paragraph 1 in the classroom will be affected by the class rule above, has made them all line up. Okay? A lot of stuff has happened here in order for this to occur. Remember that word viewport. Viewport means the same thing as like the size of your monitor. So for example, if I go mouse to mouse, corner to corner, this is 100% of my viewport. A block level container or a div level container is going to take up the entire viewport along the side. Let me turn this down real quick. Okay. We can also add, because we have this class rule, we can add more rules. Like for example, if we added a background color up in the top style, up in the top container rule, what background color should we make it? Purple. All right, we'll go, this blue violet will make purple. And then I'm going to change the color of the font, which is the word color, to white, like this. Now, because I've written all 3 of these class rules inside of a class container, it's going to affect every student, every element that's contained within that class, because these are all in the div that has the class of container. So when I go back to my output, oops, that's not my output. This is my output. You're going to see it's become a purple bar with white text. And when I resize that purple bar with white text, you're going to see that each of the pieces within it are going to only take up a little bit of space, and they're going to flex around the changing viewport size. So if I was on my phone, for example, let's pretend that this is the shape of my vertical cell phone. Okay. I can still have the same order of block paragraphs, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, in the classroom. They're kind of butting up against each other just a little bit, but they're going to keep the same order that I've written them here in the code. Okay? Because I've set my div class of container to have a display of flex, it's going to flex when the display does. So let's say if I'm on a tablet, something a little bit wider, you're going to see it's going to maintain the same order, block paragraph 1, 2, and 3, etc., without me having to do any extra work or without me having to do any extra configuring. Okay? It might be a lot to take in at the moment, but the more you practice it, the more you give it a shot, the more sense it begins to make. Okay? Let me see what else I wanted to show you. Now that you've seen how Flex containers can come together, you can see how these different pieces in something like the W3 Schools or in the, FlexBox examples right here, you can see what you can make with a FlexBox and a little bit of time. I've shown you a very, very basic version of a FlexBox. These are more advanced. So these are things that you can, now that you can see some of the pieces that come together, you can see how different grids, or like cards, for example. Let's check out the cards section, okay? If we click on View Example for something that you specifically enjoy seeing, right? Let's do just this Align Items Flex End. We view the example right here. It's going to give you the code with all the different class rules for cards, card singular, and then a bunch of different CSS that you can copy and adjust, card image, and then as well as a bunch of HTML that you can copy and paste in order to make this card style layout on your page. Okay? Let me close that example. Let's go to some website layouts right here, this green one. this is going to be the most common way that I want you to start off using flexboxes. Okay? If we look at layout number 1, you'll see it's got these different div containers with the semantic tags like header, footer, article, aside, navigation, etc., as well as all of the different HTML and style container or styling inside of this big container right here. Okay. One thing I forgot to mention, which you don't have to do today, but I want you to, in case you're experimenting around with some of the resources that I've provided here, you can set a class rule because all classes have periods, just like all IDs have numbers. So if you're writing an ID rule, you want to use the hashtag instead of the period. So if I had something with an ID of container, it would be hashtag container, followed by curly brackets. I'm just put another hashtag in the middle. There is currently nothing with the hashtag of container, but if I wanted to write an ID rule a little bit later, that would be how you do that. One last thing I want to show you before we go into experimentation / study hall type mode is a shortcut that allows you to turn your code on and off, okay, without having to erase it, because I really want to emphasize you want to keep as much of the code intact as possible. And I'm almost done talking. I know I've been talking for a while. The comment shortcut, which is a way to leave yourself comments, leave yourself little notes as you write your code, and as a way to remove specific parts from the document flow, is Control/. So if I highlight this background color of purple, actually I want to do the regular color of white because then it won't appear. Let's split my screen so you can see the example here. If I highlight the color white and then I hold the Control button and press the / key, you're going to see it turns into this color white with these green little, it's got a green overlay and these little / asterisk slash, okay? When I refresh, because I've turned this into a comment, it keeps the code there. I've just set it to off because it's removed from the flow. The computer's not going to read it, and the computer's going to read the instructions that we give it, okay? If I wanted to turn off this whole div container right here with my P4 paragraph 1, 2, 3, and 4, the top one, I can highlight that whole thing, hold Control and press /, and that will turn it into a green comment, which will remove it from the document flow. If I go down here and I look at my spans and my images from my inline demonstration, let me close this so it's a little bit larger. My spans and my images, keeping my body unselected like so, and I hold Control/, Control S, and green refresh, it will just show you the div class of container, but I will still have all that code that I wrote in case I want to bring it back later. Okay? One thing to keep in mind when using the comment shortcut is that they start and stop wherever you see these little arrows. If it's HTML, it's going to have a little exclamation point. If it's CSS, it's going to have these little slashes. Okay? So if I wanted to bring just this span back in, and I try to Control/ it out, it's not quite going to work. You're going to see it's going to get a little angry. I first have to uncomment the original, comment out the parts that I don't need again, just toggling off specific parts. I'm going to do the bottom two things right here, and then that'll bring my specific element back in. If you want, you can uncomment things line by line, so you can toggle them on and off by clicking on the number 26, for example, comma or Control/ 27, Control/ 28, Control/ and then 29, Control/. That will give me the ability to, if I ever wanted to go back and turn on any of these elements and get them to appear on my screen again, I can just highlight them by clicking on the number again, Control/, Control S, refresh, and it will appear. It's a way to experiment. It's a way to troubleshoot if you're trying to figure out why your specific code's not working. The Control/ comment shortcut is going to be really, really helpful for you. So I'm going to turn this back to white, Control/, Control S, green refresh, and you're going to see it reflected on my output over here. I'm going to add one last thing. I'm going to add a text. The last thing I'm going to add, if I'm trying to change the text size, you don't have to memorize exactly all the properties and all the values. Remember, I don't want you memorizing all the HTML and all the CSS, okay? I want you experimenting. If you're trying to change something related to the text, type out the word text and see what VS Code gives you, okay? So there's different text indentations, there's different text size adjusts, there's different text wrap. Let's check out text size adjust. That doesn't give me any helpful hints that I can see right here, and it's giving me a little warning that makes it a little bit more difficult to change. So if text doesn't work and you're trying to change what the words are on the page, you can also try the word font. What I'm looking for right here is font size. I'm going to click on font size, and then it's going to give me some suggestions. Perhaps I want to make it extra, extra large. Control S, refresh. That will make my font extra, extra large on my output. Okay? I know this is a lot of information. This is the getting started part of understanding a FLEXBOX by building a container, building a class rule with a style container, adding that class to a div a little bit later in the HTML, and by setting it to a display of flex, you unlock a more automatically adjusting HTML output. Okay? And now I know this is a lot to process. So what I want you to do with the remainder of our period, which is about 45 minutes, is either a study hall or practicing with display flex. And I can help you with that specific thing if you need. I do want to wrap up the PowerPoint really quickly so that you can tell what I'm looking for by the end of the day. You know you're getting it by knowing what a FLEXBOX does. You know you're getting it because you understand how to make a style container inside of the head, and you have some practice using parents and children, something that are continuously used skill sets within web design. Okay? Why are we doing this? Because different divs stacked on top of each other or nested within one another is a major web design skill. It's a great way to keep all your pieces organized from one another and interacting with one another as they're supposed to. By adding the style tag at the top, you are able to improve your syntax, and your code is less messy because you have one single spot for your styling, you have one single spot for your HTML, and then because those two are separated, it's easier to fix one and put everything in one spot and put everything in another spot. And you can tell where is which. Then lastly, isolating these pieces helps for better troubleshooting. If you know all of your style is up in your style container, then you know to look there if something's going wrong with the way it looks. If you know all your HTML is in the body container or in different divs, then you'll know to look there if that's the thing you're trying to fix. Okay? So with the remainder of the period, study hall, not Battle Cats hall. Study something academic. Okay? And then you'll exit task. You can start your exit task now if you'd like, but complete it before the end of the period. I want to know how using a FLEXBOX is different from using a regular div. And between the two, which do you prefer? You can also take a look at fifth period's notes in case you need a refresher or you want to see what they're doing in their code. Okay? This is a lot of information, but it's all been recorded. It's all available for you to go back and look at. I want you to experiment a little bit today amidst your study hall. Does that make sense? Okay. Hold on. I'm almost done. Thank you. Okay. So your exit task is posted. I'm going to upload this video as well as if you look at Tuesday's Flex, or it's not Flex, excuse me, you're going to see a resource that shows the container and the CSS that's necessary. So I will provide you my code today if you want to copy my code and experiment with it from there. And there's also fifth period's video from yesterday in case you want to watch that. I have headphones or you have your own. I'll hold on to your phones until the last part of class like normal. But this is the main thing I wanted to show you today. Okay? We'll go into a little more depth tomorrow on Thursday.